Morning fellowship. How we doing today? Good, right? All you need is a bunch of kids. Dressed so cute. They are amazing, amazing. Love those hand motions. So good. My name is Becky. I oversee all the counseling here at Fellowship, and I'm thankful to be with you here this morning. I am the mom of 4 boys, so when I see a group of kids like that, I'm always grateful and rejoice with that. My boys didn't do the hand motions very well when they were in the choir, but always cheered them on. So I have 4 sons. My oldest is 20, almost 29, and I have triplets that are almost 24. So I had a litter of kids all at the same time. So my job always, as their mom, was to stay ahead of them. I tell moms all the time these days that if your kids wake you up, you might as well stay in bed that day because you are behind and you will never catch up. So my goal was to wake up before my kids and tiptoe around the house because my triplets, when they were little, they heard any sound I made. So I tried to get ahead of them because I was a single mom and I had to start ahead of them. If I didn't, I was behind all day. But then something happened when they turned into 4 teenagers, and I could have set off a bomb in that house and they wouldn't have waken up in the morning. It was awful. So I tried all different ways. I'm a coach at heart and an athlete, so I have a loud voice. But I tried my calm, cool voice. I would walk in full of the Spirit, rub their little shoulder, and say, "Son, good morning. It's a good day. Time to wake up." Nothing. I would pull at their covers, which would get a little resistance, but I'm a strong, so I just yanked that thing right off. Nothing. Opened the blinds, no movement, but when I really needed to get serious, I would just walk over across the room and turn on the light. Because they could have their eyes closed and that light would shine somehow through, changing the posture of the morning. And I was a designer, so I designed their room so that the bed was across the room from the light. So if they wanted to change it, they had to get out of bed to get that started. I'll tell you, the one morning of the year I never had to do that was when I would walk in and say, "Good morning, son, it's Christmas." They would dart out of bed, right down the hall. Because the truth is, Jesus turned the light on Christmas, right? He literally said, "I'm the light of the world," and my boys rejoiced in that day, hoping for what they had asked for to be under the tree. Jesus turned the light on. He would say of himself, "I am the light of the world. Those who follow me will not walk in darkness, but they will have the light of life." And when Jesus said he was the light of the world, he knew what he was talking about. He was the creator of light. And I love to geek out on science. I wished I would have loved to geek out on science in 7th grade when I actually got a grade for it. But I love to look up facts. And one of the things that took me to this week looking up facts was that when Jesus said, "I'm the light of the world," he spoke light into existence, and that light is amazing. Our sun is huge. It would take 1,300,000 Earths to fit into our sun. That's how big it is. And it's not even the brightest star. There are stars more than 14,000 times brighter than the sun. Are you impressed with my geeking out? You know, I even looked up this week because we know at Christmas time we celebrate this star that somehow shone over Bethlehem. By the way, free moment for you. One of my favorite new Christmas movies is The Star, and it's in theaters near you. Recommended highly. The star that shone, some astrophysicists believe it wasn't a star at all. They believe that it was the planets aligning just a certain way that would cause that light to shine over that city of Bethlehem. As it was prophesied, God literally lined up the planets for his son to be born. He is the light of the world. There are several things that light does. One of the things that light does, it makes us see things we didn't see before. If you've ever felt like you cleaned your kitchen and put a brighter wattage bulb in your kitchen light, you were sorely mistaken. And you realize, wow, that floor isn't supposed to be gray. It was originally white. So was the grout. If you want your car to go to a mechanic so it could be fixed, what you pray for is that it will mess up in front of the mechanic and not work perfectly. Because when you have something that's broken, you want someone to shine a light on it and fix it. When people come to me for counseling, I do a ton of couples counseling here. And I can tell when I have a first time I experience a couple, they are on their best behavior. I can even see them looking at each other like, don't you do that. Don't bring that up right now. And they start in really behaving well, and I think to myself, we're not going to get anywhere because they came to me because something was broken. And so I mess with it a little bit to get them rolling. And once they get rolling, we can work. I can pull my clipboard out and say, wow, looks like communication's a challenge for us. Because when something is broken, you want to go to the person who can fix it, and you want it to be broken so they can see it, so they can shine a light on it. Light does that. It illuminates things in our life, especially those things that are not working like they should. That's great when it's someone else's problem. But what happens when God turns the light on us and says, there's something in your life that you need to fix? That makes us pretty uncomfortable because we don't take it to somewhere. We're the ones that need to do the work. That happened to me once. I remember when my son Trevor was a senior in high school. He was about to go away to college, and he had his brothers messing with him for 18 years of his life, just about. And so I decided to give him the master bedroom because he deserved a lock from them to him. So he had the master bedroom that whole year. And I wandered up there one morning, and I found 12 bowls in his room of varying degrees of cereal and ice cream. The spoon was stuck to the bottom. It was nasty. As I was walking around his room collecting these, I was thinking, I didn't even know I had 12 bowls. This is amazing. I was washing those bowls, and I was calling my best friend who I worked with, and I said, Sandy, I can't believe it. I found 12 bowls in Trevor's room. She said, well, why would you expect his room to be different? You never asked him to clean it. Yeah, so silence. That's not funny at all. I was like, whoa, that was like a zing. So I get to work that day, and I said, well, when you said that, it kind of made me feel like a bad mom. She said, you're not a bad mom. You're a great mom, Becky, but you never asked them to clean their room. I said, I'm kind of feeling like a bad mom again right now in front of you. She said, she had girls 10 years older than my boys, and she said, I realized my girls didn't know how to cook right before the oldest one was getting married. And I said, oh, you didn't teach your girls how to cook? You're a bad mom. She said, once I realized I didn't teach them to cook, that summer before she got married, I just said, all right, girls, you're on a schedule now. Once a week, y'all are going to cook. You're going to shop for a meal, you're going to cook it, you're going to do the dishes. And she said, that way they learn how to cook. I said, did you take about 1.5 years of deep soul searching and agonizing self-hatred when you realized they didn't know how to cook? She said, no, I just decided to teach them. That's a novel concept. I didn't realize that you could recognize you had done something wrong and change it. Because I would rather, when the light shines on me, ignore it and say, I'm doing this right. Because if I change the way I'm doing it, I have to admit that I wasn't the best mom I could have been. I have to recognize I had failed. I had to recognize I've got guilt for not doing this right. Rather, I could have just said, wow, Trev, let's start taking the bowls downstairs after you use them, son. Because you're about to get ready to go to school. And you're going to want to take care of your space. And so that's what I did. And when I went to visit him in college, all he would do is tell me how sloppy his roommates were. I was like, they must have had bad moms, son. It takes me so long to get to a place where I'll let God shine the light in my life and change something. Because I'd rather walk around the darkness rather than say, I've done this wrong for so long. Because when God shines a light on something, I go right away to the absolute. I don't think, wow, I should have taught my son how to keep his room clean. No, I say, I'm the worst mom on the planet. My son's going to be a terrible husband. That's where I go. That is not God. That's the enemy. The enemy makes you feel completely horrible. God is specific. He puts his finger on something and says, we could work on this. He shines that very specific surgical kind of light and says specifically one thing. We turn it off because we don't want to face the fact that we could have done something better. God knows we're going to fail. That doesn't surprise him at all. Oswald Chambers, writer of My Utmost to His Highest, says, when I fail, I learn to trust God and mistrust myself. We don't need to be overwhelmed with guilt and shame when light shines on something that's broken in our lives. We need to thank God for that. Because he is the creator of life. He is the light of the world. He said, those that are walking in darkness through Isaiah will see a great light. We are told in Revelation that there is no sun and moon in heaven. He himself is the light, which means we will stand before pure light. I do not want that to be the first time I hear I did something wrong, because I can't fix it then. I want him to shine light on me every single day to say, Becky, let's work on this. Because when I stand before him face to face someday, it's too late to change it. I want to know now. He wants us to know now. The light causes us to see. It is our friend. We should be grateful. What is he shining that light on for you this season? What a gift. What a gift to not push it away. What a gift to agree. The word for that in the Greek is homologeo. Say the same thing. If God shines a light on you, just say the same thing as he is. It's true. You know it's true. And it's also okay. Do something different. Light not only shows us what's there, it also changes the circumstances. My boys could have their eyes closed shut, that light comes on, and you just know you're not going back to sleep because something has changed. When Jesus says, I am the light of the world, those who walk with me will not walk in darkness. They will see the light of life. When God comes into our life, he changes things permanently. I experienced that with my son, Logan. September 11th happened, and my boys, my triplets, were in first grade. And I sat like every parent at that time with my sons that week talking about this unexplainable, impossible tragedy in our nation, in our country, in our world. And I sat there one day and I was asking them, I said, what's going on at school? What are kids talking about? And Boone said, I'm really worried, Mom, because the kids are saying this is the end of the world. And I said, well, what are you thinking about that? He says, well, I'm afraid Logan's going to go to hell. Which is like really bad sibling rivalry when you damn your brother to hell. I didn't even know how to handle that. I was like still working on them fighting over a pair of shorts. I said, well, tell me more about that, Boone. He said, well, you know, like last year I accepted the Lord and I got baptized, so I know I'm going to heaven. But if Jesus comes back, Logan didn't do that, so he might not go to heaven. Which Logan, again, snarled at. So I wisely pulled him into another room and I said, Logan, you know what, bud? I've always told you that you have a problem in your heart that you cannot fix. And once you realize you have a problem you cannot fix, then you can talk about what Jesus did for you and you can ask him to fix it. But son, do you know that you have a problem you can't fix? He said, yeah, I do. I said, well, what keeps you from asking Jesus to fix that? He said, because my heart is too bad for Jesus to live in. My 6-year-old boy, he said, I have a temper, and he did. He had a raging temper. So I pulled him in my little study, and I said, Log, you have a temper, but you have so much good in you. You are just the kindest boy. You are such a good leader. Your brother Cameron, who is so severely disabled that he just wreaked havoc even at that point in Logan's life, hurting him at times, breaking his brand new toys. I said, Logan, when Cameron does something that doesn't work, you are the first one and the kindest one to reach out to him. You have so many good parts of your heart. I said, do you remember how I called you down for dinner? He said, yeah, you were really mad. I said, I know. I said, but I asked Jesus to fix my heart a long time ago, and he's still doing that. So I took him to Ephesians 2, where it says, we are all dead in Christ, dead, but God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive in Christ. So he gets up from where we're sitting, and he draws these two hearts. And keep in mind, he is a first grader. And so he draws this one heart that's on my right, and he writes the word good in it throughout the heart. And remember, it's took about 10 minutes because he just learned to write. So he writes the word good, and in the far corner, he writes the word bad. And he said, so this is my heart right now, mostly good, but a little bit bad. I said, that's right, Logan. And so then he draws the other heart, bigger, more goods, writes good in every single corner of that heart on my left. And so he says, okay, so this is my heart now, mostly good, but a little bad. And this is my heart in heaven, all good. I said, that's right, Logan. And the only difference between your heart and mine is I've asked Jesus to cover the bad part in my heart. And I drew a cross above the word bad. And he looked at me and said, well, I want my heart to look like that tonight. And then he prayed for Jesus to cover the bad part of his heart. And that's what he does for us. It's the simplest truth, and it is true. The light covers darkness. Whatever you would write in that space, it is covered. Logan was thinking about his temper when he wrote that. But you might be thinking of something else. You may be thinking of an addiction. You may be thinking of a habit you can't fix. You might be thinking of how you numbed your pain last night. You might be thinking of how many days you have talked about God, but not to God. What would you write in that spot today? What do you need the light to cover in your life? Light covers darkness. He is the light of the world. Whoever follows him will never walk in darkness. He will experience the light of life. His light covers everything in your life today. You have no reason to sit in darkness today. It is a gift that he shines light into every corner of your heart because he is looking at you in love. He says in Romans, he is the only one who condemns us, and he doesn't do it. When he said those words in John 8, it's following a passage where a woman had been caught in adultery and was thrust before him. And he says to the crowd, whoever is without sin, cast the first stone. And they all left. He looks at her and he says, where are your accusers? He says, I don't accuse you either. The only one who could chose to shine the light on her life. And he says, go and sin no more. Caught in the very act, his light covers darkness. But it doesn't just cover the darkness. If all God ever wanted to do in our lives was cover the darkness in our hearts, as soon as we made that decision, we would go immediately to heaven. But that's not his only goal. His desire is to cover the darkness in our hearts, and then he desires for us to reflect that light to others. He says in Matthew, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. The beautiful thing about that truth is we don't have to engender light, we reflect light. We reflect his light to others. It is effortless, and it is unbelievably engaging. Several years ago at Christmas, you might remember that we had a young couple here that had been imprisoned for their faith in Iran. They came, Matthew Anahita and her sister Tina came here, and we as a church found a place for them to live, and you donated furniture, pictures, towels, everything that they would need, and I got to go design the house for them, which is my passion. So we spent a lot of time right after that Christmas getting their house all ready for them to move into. And we were out one night at the end of December 2 years ago having dinner together. And I get a phone call from my son Logan, who at this point is a senior in college studying the Bible to be a pastor. And he was youth pastor, interim youth pastor at the church I used to work at. And he said, Mom, I just finished youth tonight and my arm is really sore. It feels really weird. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, I was throwing kids around like I always do, which is, of course, what he learned well at home. And Logan's about 6'3", 250, a former football player. He's a big kid. He said, my arms really feels weird. It's kind of swollen. I said, well, let me check in with you tomorrow and see what's going on. So I called him the next morning, and by now, the arm was 3 or 4 times its size and really hard and purple. So I drive home to Riverside, and I get him, and we go to the doctor, and we begin this process of trying to diagnose what's wrong with my son's arm. It makes no sense at all. After a full day of tests, we land in the hospital, and he has a blood clot right by his heart. And what they began to recognize is that the blood clot not only existed there, but part of it had broken off, and so he was just very, very, very sick in the hospital bed. They did an angioplasty to try to open up the vein, and they were unable to. In the midst of all of that, they recognized that this was not a vein problem, it was a structural problem that he probably had his whole life. He's a really heavily muscled kid, a really big kid, and so they had realized that part of his rib and his muscle structure had closed off this vein, and he had to have this major surgery to remove a rib and to remove a whole muscular skeletal structure system, and they didn't have a doctor to perform it. And so all of this information was coming in just in a period of days, and I was just overwhelmed. It was shocking. I had a disabled son, and I had a whole journey with that. This was Logan, though. This was one of my healthiest kids, and he has a beautiful fiance, getting ready to start a brand new life with her, and none of this made sense. And I was driving home one night late after this information was unfolding, and I was really deeply talking to God. I have walked with God for almost 50 years of my life, and I have a deep relationship with him, which means I have a deep fear of him in all the right ways. I have seen God bless in unbelievable, impossible ways that could only be him. And I have seen God use unbelievable, tragic circumstances and turn them for his glory. I prefer this one. And I was asking for this one that night, and I was saying, I don't want to go here again. Fully aware that God can do anything and still be honored and praised and deserving of that. But I was in the darkness, tired of another story like this, just to be honest. Driving home that night, I had updated a whole bunch of family and friends, and Matthew was on that list. 10:30 at night, Matthew is undone reading about Logan, so he goes and wakes up his interpreter in Sierra Madre, 10:30 at night, because he wants to pray for me, because he believes God has a word for me in his own native tongue, because he can't do it in English. So he wakes up his interpreter. Poor Andrew gets on the other line, and Matthews calls me and says, Becky, I really want to pray for you, but I need to pray for you in my heart language. So Andrew's going to interpret as soon as he wakes up. So Andrew begins to interpret Matthew's prayer, and it is all about hope. It is all about trusting God. It is all about believing God can do a new thing. It is all about believing God can do impossible things. None of it was about, God, when this happens, it's really bad. Will you be glorified? It was all about hope for me that night, and that's what I needed. Matthew was the light of the world to me. He literally woke up, got out of bed, because he wanted to shine God's light on me. We need to be the light of the world to others. We need to have hope. What happened with Logan was within a week they found a surgeon. He was even a local surgeon. Logan had a major surgery, lost him a semester of school, had his top rib taken out, a whole muscle system taken out that causes you to know how to breathe naturally. So he had to relearn how to breathe. He has a massive scar that looks like a shark attack. But God called him to be a pastor, youth pastor at church in Manhattan Beach, where it looks cool to have a scar that looks like a shark attack. He actually kind of shows it off. God is very faithful. But I love that God didn't want me to have a night in the darkness. So he called another man to wake up. When the light comes on, when the light came on for my boys on those mornings, they had to get up to alter it. When my alarm goes off in the morning, my snooze button is twice the size of my off button. iPhone wants you to sleep in. Folks, we need to wake up. Somebody's in darkness. And we need to be the light of the world to them. And the amazing thing about being the light of the world is that first that light shines on us, then we reflect it. And we get to experience what it means to be in the light, to be doused in that truth. Moses used to go face to face with God when he was in the wilderness, and it said every single time Moses saw God, his face changed. He would wear a veil over his face because when he saw the people, he didn't want them to know when it changed back into regular Moses versus shiny Moses. But Paul says in Corinthians, we with unveiled faces reflect God's glory in ever-increasing ways. That's what we get to do. He shines on us, we shine on others. When my boys were young and we wanted to talk about an exciting event like Christmas, we would talk about how many days until that event happened. You did the same thing, right? So we would say, instead of saying how many days until Christmas, because I wouldn't count the day we were in, and I wouldn't count Christmas Day, because I'm tremendously optimistic. And my boys would say, Mom, you got to count all the days. And so we were at odds. You wouldn't think you would struggle with that, but we were at odds when it came to counting down a fun event. So we changed our plan, and although we had an advent calendar with candy in it, what we really did was at night when I put them to bed, we would say, how many dark times till Christmas? In other words, how many times am I going to put you to bed before something that you want comes? I love that method of, we still every once in a while text, how many dark times until I get to come up? How many dark times until UCLA beats USC? I just saw you checked. Merry Christmas. I love the truth of God's word. And I believe we sometimes, when we approach truth, wonder, God, how many dark times until this is fixed? I remember almost 20 years ago, I met my best friend and we said, we are going to study the Bible together up until you tell me I'm not a good mom. Then we're done. So we decided we're going to study 2 chapters a week of the Bible. And I had my oldest son do the math, because that's challenging for me. And he said, it's going to take you 11 years, Mom. So I started when my boys were 4, and I finished when they were 15, and I started right over again. But this is the Bible I studied all those years with. It's a mess. It is a mess. I'll tell you what, when I approached this Bible, my son Cameron had just gotten diagnosed. And so you know what I did? I said, God, how many dark times? Give me a date. How many dark times till Cameron's potty trained? How many dark times until he stops hurting himself or everyone else? God, how many dark times until I have enough time, money, energy to handle my angry teenage sons after their dad left? How many dark times until I find that truth? You know, what I learned in this Bible is that it's not about a date. It's about a God. It's about a God who created light and says, Becky, you don't have to wait. The truth is here and I'm eternal, which means when he said, let there be light, he didn't intend for dark to exist. He didn't intend for you to have to wait for his goodness to show. What I learned here is that he is an eternal God, which means I don't need an answer to have hope. I don't need an answer to have light. I don't need to wait to have a good time with life. If I waited, I would have never had fun at all, because there's still some things I'm waiting for. No more dark times until you have to hope. God would give you that today. What are you waiting for? What are you asking him for a date? He's waiting to give you light. He is the light of life. In him there is no darkness and there is no waiting, because he's an eternal God. We get to see him face to face, but he says, you know what? I don't exist in time, so let's do that today. What I have learned 20 years in this book is that it is survival for me. And I have learned that though we have some of the best teaching on the planet here, no one can tell me about the light that I will believe as much as him opening it up for me. This is a gift, an intimate relationship with God, fed by his word, because his word is truth. And he spoke light into existence, and he can speak it into your heart. God, I thank you for that. I am so, so grateful that the many things you say you are, you tell us you're light. Because there's nothing like darkness to make us feel alone, isolated, scared. God, you brought us life and you brought us light. This Christmas, God, what a gift for us to come out of the darkness and to trust your heart, to trust the heart of a father who would send his son. God, so we can say we adore you, so we can come to you not only faithful, but joyful and triumphant. God, I thank you for your word that is a lamp unto our feet and literally a light unto our path. You let us follow it this Christmas. In your name, amen.
How many